I am going to talk. I always try to talk about something that I wish I had known when I was your age, whether it's a skill or something about the game. And what I'm going to tell you guys today, you're not going to do. As far as I can tell, the advice is too hard. The advice is too hard, so none of you are actually going to do it. I guess that's okay. That's okay. Some of you might, though. So, since I wish I had known it when I was a kid, even as an adult, I really wish I had known it. That's something. So I'm just going to tell you. I feel honor bound to tell you how to do something very critical. So the thing that I wish I had been told was that, I guess someone did tell me, but I didn't understand, is that you had to go over your games. You have to go over your games in order to make progress. And it's basically very difficult to do. And that's why sometimes not even the strongest players do it. Or if they do it in a kind of superficial way. They'll check it with the computer after. It's not because they don't want to do it. It's because it's so hard to do it the right way. And even though I've known what the right way is, I've often failed myself just because it is so hard. So I am going to try to explain what I mean by that. And okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to explain it to you, and you guys are going to be like, this is the most boomer GM thing I've ever heard in my life. But this is the way I really think it should be done. You don't have to believe me right away. Someday in your life, you might discover that this is true. But here it is. Let's say you play a tournament. I don't care if it's 5 rounds or 9 rounds. And we're not talking about a blitz tournament online. We're talking about a real event where you're playing people at least within a couple hundred points of your rating. Maybe they're super strong, maybe they're a little lower. Sometimes the lower rated people are the hardest to beat. And sometimes those games are actually incredibly interesting. Let me throw a position on the board here, just so you can look at something kind of interesting. While we're doing this, I just moved knight d2. Question about the queen takes b2. And so let's say you play 5 rounds, could be 9 rounds. The correct way to go over your game, I'm going to explain it to you. You take 1 week for each game, and this is how you do it. You get yourself a Boomer GM notebook. You buy it at the store, right? You buy it at the store, and you write out your Boomer GM variations. There they are. You write in evaluations. You write how you felt about certain positions during the game. You write about your evaluations of the positions, your understanding of the position. Trying, of course, to understand which were bad moves, which were good moves, which were provocative moves. And then you still haven't looked at the computer. Now, a lot of people think, because I just do it without the computer at first, that they think I'm against the computer. No, that's not the case, and I will explain. Before you look at the computer, you need to show it to somebody. You need to show your analysis to somebody. First of all, I really recommend doing the analysis first alone, because when you are at the board, you are also alone. But the reason you should show it to somebody, preferably somebody a little stronger than you, maybe a coach. You could also show it to a friend. But the idea of having a coach is cool because then the coach will be a little stronger and you can heed their authority, if you understand what I mean. Like, you can believe in the things that they tell you. And trust, their evaluations, even if sometimes you don't totally get it. You go over the game with this person, and then, and only then, do you show them your notes, you tell them your evaluations, you tell them what you thought the critical positions were. They will give you feedback on everything that we just talked about. Only then will you look at it with the computer. And here's the thing. Once you put the computer in, maybe you looked at this thing for hours and hours. The computer is going to tell you you're totally wrong. It's going to tell you you're absolutely wrong and your coach was wrong on everything. So then you ask me, Kraai, well, why are you doing it, buddy? Why are you doing it? Well, first of all, the idea of the analysis is not to decide to have the computer tell you, some wacky move that you know and understands. The point of the analysis is for you to learn how to appreciate and understand the dynamics of certain positions that you will get again. And one of the amazing things about going over your own games is, first of all, you have an emotional memory of the game. And you will generally play structures that are similar to it again and again. So the computer is like a last resort, and it's going to be like a final check. And it will tell you amazing things. But one of the things to see about it is you shouldn't assign the ultimate truth to the computer, even though in some ways it's going to be more right than you or your coach. Because what you and your coach will have done is you will understand in your analysis what you thought the critical positions were. The computer's going to find loads of other stuff you didn't even think about. On moves that you were certain were forced, it's going to be like, no, man, that move wasn't forced at all. You were totally wrong. So that's the hard part. And then finally, the final step is you need to have somewhere, whether it's chess-based, that's what most people do. There's going to be other things coming, other database programs are evolving now, so this advice could change depending on the software, how that develops. But the point is, I don't care about the software. You just need a file that is called My Games, and you put every single game of yours into that file. And you got to do all that before you play in your next tournament. And that sounds rough, but that is the progress. That is the process to making progress. And I'm going to show this game. This was some game I played in the last tournament. It's the most disappointing of my games in that I was playing a lower-rated player and I failed to win again. But I had a reasonable tournament. I wasn't unhappy with it, and it was, I drew this game. Okay. So what? It hurts me when I'm looking at it deeply. And one of the reasons if it's special is I've spent over a week, and I decided I put it in part 1 and part 2 for my sensei, for my coach. And so we did it yesterday, and we didn't even get halfway. I haven't even gotten halfway yet. And that's how much I've done 10 pages of notes on this game up to about what I think is the halfway point. Okay, so what I'd like to do, it's very similar to every time I come here. I'd like to call on people to get them to give their 2 cents on the position. And let's talk about this position here. Obviously, black can take the pawn on b2. So the question I have is, does anyone have an opinion on whether black should take that pawn on b2? Any opinions on the pawn on b2? I'm also trying to work Zoom. Zoom's not like a creature that you gotta tame. I'm not very good at taming the Zoom, Okay. We got some direct messages. And I have, back in the day, we used to have this system where you guys would give exclams at the end of a sentence if you wanted to get called on. And then I just started calling on people because it was, seems like it should be just called on. I watched some of Magesh last week, and he was just kind of saying what people said, but I kind of like people to come on and say what they want to say. We got some people saying queen b2, rook b1, and rook b7 seems too strong. All right, I'm going to give a hint. I thought that knight d2, the guy shouldn't take. I thought it was abysmal. I, in fact, made a disastrous mistake. What did I miss? Why, in fact? What's the line where black can, in fact, take? And one thing, this has everything to do with going over your games. I'm just going to describe the process of failure here. So it's always possible to miss a tactic. And here I miss a tactic. And the thing that I will say here is that I have a student. He plays the London. I sometimes play the London, and I told him. I said, "Dude, don't be so freaked out when they take on B2. You'll always get compensation." Well, it turns out in this case, I was a little bit insouciant about that problem, the problem of taking on B2, and so I wasn't taking it seriously just because I had told my student that he shouldn't worry about it. And so therefore I was like, okay, I told him not to worry about it. So now I'm not going to worry about it. No one's seen it yet. No one's seen the reason why black can take. It's kind of surprising. Come on, guys. What's the reason? What's the reason black shouldn't take? We have somebody actually, we're doing this also as a Twitch stream. And we got a guy named Araz. He beat out the juniors, and this is the variation that I missed. Queen B2, Rook B1, Queen A2, Rook B7. In general, a massive positional achievement for white, but the bummer, the cold shower, is this terrible thing. And then all of a sudden, I'm toast. And I had seen this kind of trick before, but like I said, and my coach wants me to move faster. So I was like, knight d2, trust yourself, dog. Trust in the force and do it. Okay, so there it was. He took, and obviously I had to think a little bit. And luckily for myself, I have this move. So I've clearly lost the tempo, and it's very sad when you give up a pawn to lose another tempo, but black has also played c6, which isn't necessarily the biggest tempo of them all either. So let's look. Boom, boom, boom. And let's call this the next critical position. Well, let me put a move in. Let's call this the next critical position. Here's the question, and I would love people to give both an intuitive response and a response about what exactly they think black should do. By intuitive response, I just want you to have a guess. Like, do you think white has sufficient compensation, more than enough compensation, or no way? The guy's struggling for equality. That's the question. Kelsey says sufficient. Okay. And I would love to have people come on. I know that Magesh and a lot of the other people weren't calling on people. I love to call on people. I want to hear, and I think it's important to put it in words, vocalize what you see on the board. Got Eric saying black can consolidate. The question is, we have a two-part question. What should black do? That's the concrete part of the question. And number two is just intuitively, do you think that white is more than enough compensation, or just enough, or do you think he's struggling to make that compensation work? Eric is saying B6. Yeah. Sefer's saying slightly less than enough. A little bit all over the place here. Greg Shahad is out having a fun old time, and what is he supposed to be doing? He's supposed to be figuring out how we get polls working on Zoom, but he hasn't figured it out. We've asked him for years; he can't figure it out. I hope he's listening, because this would be a great poll question. Okay, Raj is saying B6 and Bishop D6. Nota bene, Bishop D6 won't work because I can always throw in Rook B3. Important point. If Bishop D6 were possible, I think my play would be less. Yeah. Okay, so we're a little bit all over the place. And yeah, I just want to say from my part, that this was a great example of where my chess values differed from my sensei. So, during the game, I felt I wasn't exactly sure. And was I bummed, first of all, that I missed the tactic? Of course. It's always, a feeling of shame and like, oh no, I'm going to get punished. But, looking at the position, I had a very simplistic way of thinking about it. Namely, let's say he gives me a tempo. Really, we're looking at either queen a6 or b6, or maybe something weird like knight a6. But in general, let's say he gives me a tempo. Let's put b6 on the board. Well, then my simplistic mind, my reptilian mind, said I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces developed, plus 5 because it's my move. So I got 5 tempi against 1. So 4 tempi. And that the c6 square is going to need some kind of tender care, right? So I felt just on that basis alone that I should be at least fine, and that from a practical point of view, I felt pretty good about it. Now, my coach, who I call KGB because he's an anonymous old Soviet dude, was not so happy about this situation for white. He was not at all convinced that I had enough compensation for the pawn. First of all, I think he was right. Now, there's some concrete reasons in black's favor, but what he sees is that the structure is hard for me to open, and that black has a pretty simple path to development. And I want to just admit this, in my own analysis, I spent a long time on this position without really thinking about his move, partly because my opponent didn't do his move, So my opponent played b6, and KGB despised this move. He instantly said that was terrible. And it's kind of interesting because one of the things about going over a game is, you get kind of used to patterns and yada yada. And so, for example, in this position, I felt that the queen on a3 was a little bit annoying because anytime I try to do rook b3, wanting to do this kind of fancy stuff, he's got queen a4 pinning the rook to the queen. And I don't, he can move the rook, obviously, but I don't want to trade. So because of that, because I thought that was kind of a cool resource for black, I didn't take this move all that seriously. And the feature of this move, let's say, is what's kind of anti-intuitive is you could say, well, look, isn't white still going to play queen b3 and win up tempo? And that's true, but the queen really wanted to be here. Plus, this is where it gets really wacky, is that this bishop coming here is actually a great development square because it hinders my c-file business. It's just a great, so actually, I have to now suddenly, right here, make a judgment call as to whether I want to allow bishop a3 or play a4. And the a4 is, of course, a tempo I'm not sure I want to do. Yeah. So we have a question about queen d3. And queen d3, let's mention that. I don't think that's going to work. Is boom, 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 and then I found this fancy pants move. Bam. And then we got bam and, no bueno. So that's the problem with ye olde queen d3. Okay, good. So what I want to say is when you're going over your game, you're going to get a lot of critical positions. And you can tell that this game is going to give, there's a reason why I'm spending 2 weeks on it, because already we're on move 9 here, and we're already deep in the thick of it, right? We are already both players have spent some time on the clock, and hard to evaluate. Plans are going to have to be made. Okay. KGB guy is the Soviet, yeah. All right, so queen c2, knight e7, castles, knight d7. All right, first critical position. No, it's not the first. I already said that was a critical position. This is a critical position. Again, I want to say here during the game, I wasn't sure. When I had to sack the pawn. It wasn't my choice to sack the pawn. But I wasn't sure, about anything about anything. But this position, I definitely felt good about it, just especially now because the knight on e7 is going to ultimately owe me some kind of other move. Or the pawn on g7 is going to owe me a move. First, yeah. Okay, so here's the question. What should White do? Spend a moment here. This one isn't easy. Also, and do an intuitive check about who you feel is better and why. I love to call on people too. So if you want to just sound off here in the chat and tell me about your life and the problems you face, we can do that. Okay, so we got Eric doing a very sensible suggestion, namely rook b3, queen a4, and then bishop d6. This might be possible, but here's the question. What are you going to do after knight g6? Black could also play rook c8 first, but that's the basic question. And I think it's a bummer, but it's a good place for us to start seeing how strong these pawns are. So you get a dynamic. This is what I mean by understanding the dynamic of the position. And seeing that it's very difficult. Like the double pawns in some ways are virtuous because they control a lot of squares. But where they're really lamos is they make it hard for my heavies to move from the queen side of the board to the king side. Not just the rook, but also the queen. She wants to get in there somehow. She wants to get to the king side, but it's very difficult for her to do. And you see this in a lot of double pawn positions, by the way. For example, the winnower with pawns on c3 and c2. And oftentimes, you just, the board is split and the pieces can't move, whether it's bishops or heavies, from one side of the board to the other. Okay. Someone's saying take and rook c1. Sure, we can look. Snip, rook c1. Let's put the rook c8. And Black's intention is just to move the knight back and then continue his fiesta. And maybe e4, sure. Let's go knight g6. It's difficult. Now, something that I'm sure people are realizing here is the knight f6, also a good move, but the knight on d2 is a real misery, right? Real misery. Yeah. Real misery. Now, other moves are possible. I think White has some compensation. I think right now you're going to have to go snip, snop, check, and then Black's going to be able to think about whether he wants to play the knight e7 or move the king, all of which are probably playable. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, possible. So we go back. Any other ideas? And Araj is talking about knight f1 to e3. Absolutely. At some point, we need to be thinking about knight f1 to e3. Yeah. Any other thoughts for White about what White should do? I got a notice to admit some people on the Zoom, and I did it. I'm multitasking over here. You guys think you have problems just trying to figure out this position. I'm multitasking. Now, Rio is in the chat. He's always good for someone coming on. Rio, what is your first take on this position, buddy? What do you got for us? Rio's not ready. He signed in and did a little bathroom break. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and Raja's talking about like a fancy one, like rook b3, knight b1, and c3. And that's a thought. But we got to say about that the knight on c3, it will touch the queen on a4. Right? Rook b3, queen a4, knight b1. You could throw in rook c1, rook c8 anytime you want. But then the knight on c3, not clear where that guy's going, right? Yeah. Okay. So I definitely feel like I made a mistake here. And this is an example, actually, where during the analysis I said to myself, I definitely don't like it. I definitely feel like it was a superficial move. But in the analysis, I was like, well, maybe objectively, it's okay, you know. Then KGB came at me, man. Started yelling at me, telling me this was terrible, most terrible thing I ever did. It probably was pretty terrible. Sefer, what do you think I should play, buddy? What do you think I should play? And I'm happy to call you. I'd love to hear your thoughts about why you think whatever you think.
I personally like myself rook b3 and bishop d6 that we've suggested earlier. I don't really find anything wrong with it. But I really don't like the other move order switched anymore, but I really don't have like a reason to back that opinion up.
Now, when you say the other move order, what do you mean by that?
Like by playing e4 immediately.
Okay.
That might go into some things with c5.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you, Stefan. Now, one thing Rio's mentioning is knight e5. He gives it an exclam. Rio, you want to come on, buddy? Let's give Rio a chance here. Ask him to unmute. He might be too shy today.
Yeah. So I was saying knight e5 because I want to like attack the c6 pawn, and after knight takes e5. My knight might cause some trouble there. So knight takes e5, and here I play d takes e5. And with the point that I want to target the c6 pawn and maybe force it to move to c5.
Okay, let's try. So rook c8.
Knight f3.
Okay. Interesting. And then I don't know, knight g6.
Now knight d4.
Okay, I respect what you're saying. Okay, let's try. That's interesting. Okay, it's becoming a little tactical. And he is saying that if I do this, that would be a terrible blunder. So let's try queen c5.
Queen b2.
Okay.
Wait. Yeah, this is fine for me. I mean, I said d2. I mean b2, sorry.
Oh, b2. Okay, I'm sorry, I misheard you. And then, I don't know, queen a3? Something like that?
Queen c2? Maybe it's the draw.
Now, even if we decide this doesn't work, Rio, what I want to say is good is it shows that you have an urgency to fix the knight on d2. And whatever we do, we got to fix that knight. Now, I want to say intuitively, I studied this game so much, I went blue in the face. I tried everything. Intuitively, the thing about knight e5 that I don't like, especially when you're going to take it back this way, is that you've killed your bishop, right? That's the thing that I don't like too much about it. Yeah, and I showed this to a student, and they tried bishop e5, and it's just, well, it's unclear what we're doing. Black always plays rook c8, just basically no matter what we're going to do. He's going to play rook c8, and then he's going to play a knight move, such as knight g6, right? So that's kind of the problem there. Okay, good. Let's go back to this position. Okay, anybody else have another thought about what should be played? Actually, it's very interesting. I'm waiting for you guys to think about it. Is that KGB had a pretty principled response here, and the more I'm trying to see it through his eyes, it's kind of like, oh yeah, interesting. Interesting. Now, Sefer, I didn't make a good move. I played a superficial move. We got someone in the Twitch talking about exactly what KGB did. I'll show you what KGB won. He won at h4. So let's say the candidate moves would be something like e4, rook fc1, maybe rook b3. I mentioned h4 probably, and e4. You could play rook fe1, but you might as well play e4 if you're going to play rook fe1. And the thing about h4 that's interesting when you see it from his perspective is, for him, where white is actually strong is the king side. And what's important to see about that is that really, and this is kind of the challenge for white, is like, in some ways I want to play on all sides of the board, but the black queen is cut from her man, and she's just bouncing around on the queen side. I'm not going to win the queen or anything. She's just bouncing around over there. And so the thing about h4 is that I need to immediately start gaining space on the king side where I am stronger. And nota bene, it's not super easy for me to move the heavies back over there, right? Now, on a concrete level, this is all intuitive stuff about why you might choose h4 without analyzing it too deeply. But on a concrete level, it is very important that I I force black to play h5. You know, I need to force him to do it. Right, so if you imagine g6 now, then knight e5 is going to be stronger, plus even the simple h5 after that. And I tried to work out this, but what nice thing now is now knight e5 comes, and when this knight comes, he's got a threat, you know? And black still owes me the rook c8 move, right? So imagine this, and that looks very scary to me. Yeah, no, that's just simply scary. That is just simply scary, right? And, okay. So I'm going to try to explain this. I played this move, and it was one of those moves you play kind of fast. So one of the things about analyzing the game is really to understand when the critical positions come. And, you know, you want to make the intuitive moves quickly. So, and I've talked about that here at the US Chess School before. But this, in fact, was a critical decision. It's intuitive in the sense that you're not going to be able to fully calculate it out. Like, I really did calculate it out to the best of my ability after the game. But during the game, you don't want to spend the gazillion hours calculating it out. Let's talk then why rook fc1 is suspect on a strategic level, right? So the first thing to say is black's move is obvious, and that's rook c8 is actually far more useful than rook c1. Number two, because now the knight on e7 is free to move. Number two, the rook might get whacked later with bishop a3. Number 3, well, not clear the rook wants to be here, especially if we're going to get fancy pants later with e4. Yeah. So this is the critical deal here. And I thought, when I analyzed it first, this is really important, I want you to see about having a coach to look at it over with you, is that I thought it would still transpose into what I considered the main line, which went something like this. e4, which was what I played, and then the guy played a funky move. He played queen a6, but KGB and myself both felt the critical move was knight g6, bishop g3, bishop e7, h4. Now, if he plays h5 in this position, I think I'm golden. Because, for example, h5, check to the queen, queen a4, ed5, ed5, knight f1, let's say castles, knight e3. Fantastic variation, after which my knight is active and the dude's got some problems. h5 is a problem, the pawn on f5 is a problem, and soon I'm going to play something like rook c3 to mess with the queen. Okay, good. So let's go back. And this, I could force this variation or something similar to it if I played h4 immediately. And the problem, though, with this variation is now dude can get away with, instead of h5, knight f6. And you remember, in the last variation, I had the jump with like knight e5 and knight d2, f3, but I've actually spent 2 moves, which have nothing to do with that beautiful knight hopping business, and now he's totally covered, as far as I can tell. Yeah. We got a comment, it's one of those stupid autopilot moves we're taught to make as a beginner. I don't know if anyone taught you. I don't know if anyone sat you down, Austin, and said, well, Austin, here's a stupid autopilot move I want you to do. But it certainly was a stupid autopilot move from me. And part of it, I think really, this is really important about analyzing your games. You need to be emotionally aware of yourself and these kinds of decisions. Because, like, you know, unless you really dig deep and understand what your thought processes are, you're still going to be making these autopilot moves. And honestly, you know, even myself, I've been doing this for a long time, and obviously I made an autopilot move. But I do have little red lights that turn on in the back of my mind, which tell me when I'm not supposed to do the stupid autopilot move. Okay, good. So let me show you the game. I want to take you to at least a couple more critical positions. Queen a6, bishop g3, probably good. So I'm stepping out. What is queen a6 intending? He's intending knight g6, tagging my bishop, and then bishop a3, tagging my rook, and then getting out of dodge, right? So now the issue will be that on knight g6, it's at least a little inconvenient with snip, snip. There the rook at least had a virtue on c1. Bishop e7, bishop d6, and I think he's toast. I think this is an example of where he's toast. Something like this. And it's all falling apart. Death. Okay, if we want to get really fancy, I guess we can do it like this. Yeah. So bishop g3, prophylactic. You see this in the London all the time. By the way, I really want to stress, going over classic games is beautiful, but a great thing about going over your own games is you're going to have similar things. And so I'm not really a London expert or whatever, but I've noticed in London, there's so many key positions where you're just moving the bishop out of the way so that some kind of knight g6 doesn't work. All right, g6. And now I got a little pressure. h4, what am I doing? I'm waiting for the bishop on f8 to move before I sink my dog into d6. If I sink it too early, he can play knight g8. So the guy goes bishop h6, bishop d6, f6, The rook comes over. King f7. All right. Here it is. I'm going to call this the central, the most hypercritical moment of the game. So, I'd say begin by asking yourself just the intuitive question of how strong do you think white's compensation is? And then I'm going to give you guys a moment or two to think about what should be done. And definitely you want to be as concrete as possible, but when you're when you do concrete variations, of course you want to pay attention to the positional stuff as you're going along, because it's going to get wacky. It's clearly going to turn wacky in just a little bit. Sefer saying compensation is over the roof. And I got to admit, I felt pretty good about it. But Zephyr, let's just imagine you're black. If you had some reason to hope, what would it be? Besides having an extra point. Like what might lead you to say, oh, maybe I can survive this thing? All right. Okay, cool. What I say cool is Austin is pleading black's case. Good. I'm glad we have some diversity of opinion. Now it is, I just want to stress, it's white's move. Very important. White's move. People are saying what black should do. And by the way, my assumption, this is a great example of humans versus computers. My assumption, and every time I've looked at the game, both by myself and with KGB, is that black's next move is rook HE8. No matter what. No matter what, the guy's playing rook HE8. Now, you turn the computer on, who knows? Who knows what the thing's going to say? But in a human game, they're going to play rook HE8 every time. So that's one of the reasons why the computer's a little confused. Okay. So Austin has a good point. If E5, F5, and he gives this variation and says white's pawns are a nightmare, and even if he gets C6 back, it's still worse. And I think we got to say that for this variation, Austin can't be too wrong. And in particular, it's not so easy to get at my king. Right, so the analysis of E5 there, I think, is, let's call it, fair. Eric Liu is saying G4, G5. Royal is saying G4. And then Sefer saying play G4 and E5. Or G4 and then G5. Right. Now imagine, if you want to do a variation, I think it's important. G4, what's the guy going to do? He's going to play rook HE8. Right? And then what? Imagine what you're going to do then. And I'd love to have somebody come on and give me their opinion about what's going to happen after G4, rook HE8, and then whether it's E5, G5, or some other thing. Eric's saying G4, rook HE8, G5. Uh-huh. Yeah. Eric, you want to come on and tell, and we'll talk through it a little bit? All right, I'm calling on Eric here.
So I want to play G4 to lock out the bishop on H6.
Mm-hmm. Let's try it out. So rook HE8, and then you want G5, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and after FG, what do you want to do?
Maybe I'll take with the H pawn.
Okay. Now, I have a choice here with bishop G7 or bishop...
Wait, actually, I'd like to take with the knight.
Fair enough. Okay, knight takes. snip, snop. And black has a big choice here. Let's say c5.
Maybe I can go queen d2.
B2.
I mean queen c3.
Okay. So you want, okay, it's not dumb. Which one you like? C3? B2? Oh, but maybe you want to do C3 just so you don't have to worry about the D3 pawn so much. Okay, good. And let's say snip. I'm assuming this one. And then I'll go knight C6.
And then maybe we can go queen e3.
Good. And what I gotta say is confusing to me about this position is I'm not entirely sure what black is or white is threatening. You know, especially after like king g8 or something. Yeah. Okay, good. Now, Eric, I want to say, first of all, whether your move is right or wrong, your plan was what KGB wanted to do. So you and that guy, you're sharing something. I don't know what it is you're sharing. It's probably unhealthy, but you are sharing that with KGB. He definitely wanted to play G4, G5. Good. All right. So I'll just show you. I battled him long and hard in this position. By the way, this thing, what I'm saying when I say battle is you got a coach, and they have some ideas in the position. You've already studied it, so you have that advantage, and then you spar with them. And so let's say knight takes G5. The reason this has got to be correct, by the way, if you're going to play G4, G5, is that the knight on D2 needs a home. So he wants to come to F3, right? So snip, snop. C5 was we did this too in our battles. And I felt, if I was black, the thing that I was worried about was this variation. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm just scared. I'm just scared. But remember, I asked long ago, I was like, if black thinks he's going to survive the position, whether it's this one or the earlier one, the reason is the knight on D2 is still garbage. So I don't know what to think of this position. It is true that, too, one good thing for black is when something like rook e1 happens, the black king has a wide variety of squares to go to, and the knight on d7 is a good defender. Of course, the queen on a6 is out. But I'll say this, KGB didn't like it. We looked at this, and I was like, dude, don't you want this one? He's like, niet, no like. So he wanted to hurt me worse than that. And so it went c5, knight f3, c takes, queen d2. And we tried a couple moves here. But for myself, I just don't see anything for white after this move, say de. And he's got other moves, queen a5, queen b7, all kinds of stuff, right? But after de4, let's say knight d4, I got that move, you know? So that's a bummer. And then, you know, what are you supposed to do? Very difficult. Very difficult. Yeah, wait a second. Let me just try something first before I hang up my cleats here. DE. I'm not entirely certain what white is doing. So D3 is a thought. And the good news for you, though, is on E5, you can do like a snip on E5, and then queen F4. So maybe something like D3. The knights are very good defenders. By the way, I had a similar instinct to this whole G4, G5 thing. And I'm going to show you guys what happened. And then we're going to go back and then try to ask what the right move was. So I played G4 too, but I played with a different idea because I didn't understand. That variation just felt unclear to me during the game. It still feels unclear to me. KGB doesn't agree. He still likes white. E5. And KGB was really upset with this move, and probably rightly so. And the weirdest thing is, I felt during the game that if the guy played f5 now, I would have a beautiful position with either bishop e7, gf, or g5. And we analyzed that, and he was right. I don't got anything. I don't got anything on that business. Anyways, I predicted exactly the game. Went like this. Similar idea to what we were just talking about. And what I missed was that boom, 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 boom. Now I get all my pieces in. Looks great. But all of a sudden, he's got like a French structure. And what did Eric probably believe when he did it with knight g5 as well? He was like, oh, if I get that dark square bishop, the guy's going to be raged upon. Well, it was my intuition too, man. But all of a sudden, he's got the French knights, and the French knights are covering all those dark squares. All right. So, and after knight takes d4, the game is going to get hairy, and I think this position is actually equal. My opponent blundered. Maybe we'll get into it, but before all that happens, I want to go back, and I feel strongly, even if KGB doesn't agree with me, even if he doesn't agree with me, I feel strongly about what white should do. So let's give him a moment. Let's go back. What move, what plan would really put black under some beautiful pressure here? We got a question. Is KGB still alive? KGB will never die. That's one of the few things we know in life, is the guy will never die. Any ideas for white? I can't tell you his real name. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. So I guess the proper way to say it is I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. You can't, KGB won't be known, you know? Any ideas for white here? Well, maybe you could play with that, Austin. Austin's talking about how sad it is with the d2 knight. And let's say the simple truth. As long as we fix the knight, the guy is wrecked. Oh, Aryan, I couldn't tell you privately in chat either, buddy. I'd still have to kill you. Yeah. Okay, Rio's talking about knight f1, h2, g4. And Austin's now noticing it. And good. I think knight f1 is the right move. And I especially want to say, this is important with the computers. Like, maybe the computer is going to come when I look at it and tell me g4, g5 is the right move. Maybe it will. But I guarantee that knight f1 is the correct move. So what do I mean by that? When you play g4, you don't know what the hell's happening. And it's important to see you're giving up your main advantage, which is your king is so much safer than his king. Your king is still safer after g4, but it's not hard to imagine that the position's going to explode, and then you're going to have to tend to your old man. For knight f1, it's a very simple process. You guys were talking about h2. I think knight e3 is also good. Do I mind if he trades his bishop? No. He can trade it. It's okay. So, yeah, I think this is fully beautiful. And he can't do c5 yet because I got bishop e7 and ed. So I figure the main variation is rook he8. Like I said, that's the human move. And now knight e3. If I was afraid of bishop e3, I guess I could play knight h2. That might also be reasonable. I like the, let's call it the centralization of the knight. But knight h2, I think is okay. And if there's a variation here that needs to be seen, maybe it's that after c5, I can say check to the bishop, finally move my queen over, and I got a nice initiative. I don't want to be black here, my friends. I do not. That's right. So there's all kinds of things, by the way. I mean, it's a positional decision, really. There's all kinds of things that black can try. So this is a position where we're playing knight f1. But first, from a human point of view, it's important to see that, yeah, rook HE8. You gotta be playing rook HE8. Also, now, of course, now the D2 knight's out of the way, the queen is ready to do something like queen E2 stuff. And important to see, like, black gets to do more stuff when you blow it open with G4, G5 than he gets to do now. It is very difficult for the guy to do anything. And when we put the knight on E3, an amazing feature of the position is that the knight actually makes it more difficult for black to do stuff, because I got knight G4 he's got to worry about. I'm pressuring D5. And, you know, of course you can play something like queen B7 and it might feel like your queen's coming closer. And I analyzed variations with like knight F8 and queen B7. But the queen is pretty nasty still. And if she wants to crawl back in her little hole over there, fine. Well, and of course, the simple thing with knight G4 is that my queen gets to play on the dark squares over there. And the bishop on D6, of course, still gets to be amazing. Okay. Now, I want to reiterate some basic stuff. Analyzing your game, you will get tactics. We've done a lot of tactics today. You're going to get real-life calculation. And what I mean by that is when you do puzzles, there's somebody's winning at the end of it. In real games, somebody's like a little bit better at the end of it, like something like this. There'll be tactical bases for all that stuff, right? And in real games, too, a lot of times the defense will bail out into some kind of bad endgame, right? We're actually going to see that. I'll show that in a second here. So you get that, and you're going to get some opening experience, especially structural opening experience when you really dive deep into your games. And especially without the computer, because you're going to get some ideas. And you're going to gain a sense the computer won't tell you of like, oh, right, dude, the knight on D2, move it, man. Get that guy into the game and don't play G4. You're going to get a sense of that kind of very important middle game thinking. And then you're going to get the best endgame training of all. This is the way it went down. Because then you start getting positions like this, and we got ourselves a real fascinating position in our hands. And I'll show you my... And by the way, sometimes when you're analyzing the game, sometimes there's going to be words, and there's going to be evaluations, and sometimes it's just variations, just hardcore variations, like you go again and again and again. When we lived at the GM house, we'd sit there, and we'd also go with a friend, and let's just go variation again, and see what you find. Same thing, and I'll just show. Sometimes, for example, it'll look like that. Just variation after variation after variation. Sometimes they're long, these rook endgame variations, because that's what we're going to get. We have a transition to various attempts where black's going to try to bail out. I'm going to be a pawn up, and he's going to try to bail out into some kind of nasty endgame. And that's going to be the next phase. That's what I said there are 2 weeks on this thing. And because here there's going to be the first question of the transition of the endgame. There's different ways, different... things going on, and also then the end game itself, where there's going to be a lot of study-like positions in the end game. And one of the interesting things too, I just want to finish about this position. I thought I was like, yeah, either clearly better or winning here, and it's probably true. But black's position is much more resilient than I originally thought. And one of the reasons, by the way, it is more resilient is because I moved my pawn up to G4. All right, everybody. We do need a KGB emote. I'm going to leave it there. And I don't know when Greg Serhat is going to invite me back on the U.S. Chess School. He's probably not going to invite me back. You know, he's had enough of me. Kostya's had enough of me. So if I'm allowed back, I'm always thankful to do it. But for now, my friends, I'm going to leave it there. And I don't even know if I know how to turn off the Zoom. You know, it's so confusing to me. So I will see you guys next time.